Ladies and gentlemen, it is equally so important to have a gentle reminder as you ask me what we stand for, in that we now have a new government here in the city of Johannesburg, focused on delivering for the people of South Africa. And the task that we put towards him and Mashaba is building a capable government that is clean, free of corruption, and able to advance the interests of all South Africans, not just a few. It is that capable state that is able to steer and direct the interests of all South Africans in ensuring that we address our fairly painful and difficult history, but equally so ensure that we build a prosperous mining economy that includes more South Africans. I think if we get stuck in the term, we run the risk of not being able to posit a new vision, a new way forward, a new beginning is what I'd like to call it, for a way of being inclusive to more South Africa. So you might excuse me if I don't speak about the term radical economic transformation, because I do think that it is now being used primarily in many ways as a fig leaf for elite enrichment. It's no different to what is happening in the rest of the continent, where we see one set of elites seek to replace another in order to create a new wealth that is concentrated. It becomes a way of legislating that and ensuring that there's a zero-sum game that changes one set of owners for another, and where in fact ordinary people, ordinary South Africans, ordinary Africans don't end up being included in that same economy, and genuinely doesn't always deliver any improvement. So if you don't mind me saying up front, if we're here to talk about inclusion, I am here to represent poor South Africans who are left outside. And I make no apology about that point, for it is the approach that we need to take if this sector is going to be much more inclusive. Much of us want a mining that is successful and prosperous, that benefits as many people and creates as many jobs and ownership as possible. And I would posit that ultimately it would require a change in boardrooms, a change in communities, and ultimately a new introduction and a focus on who are the new entrants into the mining sector. I firmly believe that it is possible that we can have more people and a diversity that comes into the mining sector. We as a country stand on perhaps our rich mineral endowments and we can make this part of a cornerstone of a growing economy, but equally so an inclusive and one that is changed. It's going to require a bold new vision of what mining can be for South Africa. I call it a new beginning, a new reset, and a new way forward. It requires, first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, that our mining sector becomes globally competitive. With our reserves of platinum and many other minerals, South Africa cannot go to the world with a moral argument to say, you must buy our minerals. We must accept, ladies and gentlemen, that we are competing. We're competing with many other countries in Africa, and therefore for us as a country, we don't need to posit a moral argument as to why our minerals are better than any other ones. We must put forward a business case that competes. China's growth rate is now below double digits. It's at 6.7% of annual growth. It is now still significant for the second largest economy. India recently touched 7.1 last year. Indonesia registered 5% and South Korea 2.8. These are figures in the region generally regarded as the world's current driver of economic growth. And we as South Africa can contribute to that. If we want to make the most of our trade within this region and the rest of the world, we have to see mining in a different way. We can't be trapped in the wrong paradigm that has existed for a long time that makes it hard for a few to participate and more new entrants to come on board. In this old paradigm of mining, I suspect there are two things. One is that mining is a powerful tool of patronage that can transform politically connected people into billionaires at a stroke of a pen. And two, it's a symbolic battleground for ownership of our country's wealth and resources, and a battle that continues to be driven along racial lines. If we truly want to tap into mining's potential to help grow an inclusive economy, it cannot be either of those two things. It has to be. In fact, it can't simply be a source of instant wealth for a few people. It can't put us against each other. We have to change the attitude of hostility towards mining. We have to swap one form of nationalism. We can't swap one form of nationalism for another. It would mean effectively replacing one racial elite for another. And the new elite would seek to protect its own. That's why I think we can't be treating each other with suspicion. It's better for us to enter the conversation in a way that says, how do we make ourselves globally competitive? How do we ensure that against the backdrop of economic growth that is taking place in other countries, our mining can truly become a friendly place for investors, both domestically and internationally? We can't say anyone who seeks to invest in this country is seeking to take the resources and run away with them. That is an old paradigm. We need a new one that ensures that whilst we sit on our endowments of minerals, we can transform this industry to ensure that it includes more people. We can't just speak of how MPRDA works because, and how we can make the mining charter more palatable. We can discuss at length the damaging manner of implementing this version of radical economic transformation, essentially taking the names off the doors and corner offices and replacing them with new ones. We have to ask those students to come on board, and we have to give them prospecting rights. In the early 80s, mining was at 21%, was second only to manufacturing in terms of GDP contribution. In the last decade, the total numbers of employed in the mining sector peaked at 800,000. 3 decades later, this picture has changed dramatically, with both mining and manufacturing dropping out of the top 3 GDP contributors. Mining now sits at a fifth and contributes less than 8% of GDP. Employment sector has dropped from 800,000 to 500,000. Now, there are multiple reasons for this decline. The cheap exploited labor during apartheid era has made a way possible for what now generally considered has been replaced to what now is generally considered well-paid work, certainly as a comparative average between other sectors such as manufacturing and agriculture. We need to have a discussion about how we improve that, but equally so, we must understand that it can't just be an industry that protects those who work at the expense of those who are not working. We must make it possible for mining to be at the driver of job creation. And we must also accept that the business of mining is the business of profit making. I'm here to say that we must help our mining companies become a lot more profitable. It's that sort of growth that we need that will attract an opportunity for us to create more work for our people and ultimately broaden opportunities. We must, without doubt, have the appropriate safety regulations in the industry. The conditions under which action must be taken against unsafe mines should be clear. And where possible, the regulator should allow the potential dangers to be corrected rather than punishing companies by closing down entire mines. We need to look at a more favorable tax regime. South Africa cannot build the world's deepest mines without assisting mine owners through favorable tax schemes. The benefits of increased employment are such that taxation should perhaps be lowered to incentivize the creation of mining jobs, especially when we look at the current economic climate that we sit in, where in fact we're stuck in a low growth environment. We must find ways of financially assisting these new entrants, who most of them are black, to join the industry. We may want to start a conversation on how to formalize and assist those who are trading in the informal sector of mining. And at the same time, we must ask ourselves, why are mining companies expected to plug holes left by an inefficient local governments by providing schools, building houses, and developing communities? This should not be the core of their function. It's not what they're necessarily good at. And it's become quite clear that 5 years ago I went to Marikana, 5 years later the conditions remain the same. I want to make this to say that the money spent on these projects would be better off sitting in an independently managed trust and allocated towards projects that directly benefit the community. This could include a higher education fund for qualifying learners in this respective area. It could also include the possibility, and I want to say this here, of a jobs and justice fund. A fund where mining companies can contribute into, and we can talk about how the management process of that comes into play. But this fund must be designed for precisely those two issues. How do we stimulate jobs and fund new entrants in an industry that's very expensive to start off with? And how do we ensure that there's justice for communities who are left in mining communities?